just going to mute your microphone while I start. And if you want to if you've got a question during the session, just type something into the chat box and I can give you the microphone if you would like. So perhaps we'll just try and see if both of you can type in something into the chat box so that I know that you have a question and that you can communicate with me if you need to. Can you see the chat box there? Brilliant, Dorothy, thank you. And another sample question, excellent. Okay, so we'll just get started. I'd like to welcome you very warmly on this very cold winter evening to the webinar. Alison, who is my trusted co-presenter generally and wing woman, will be here to help you if there are, in the very unlikely event that we will have some technical difficulties. And I'm just going to go on to the next slide to show you some of the things you need to write down just in case you do have some technical difficulties. But first off, we've kind of done the tests here. You can see where the chat window is and you've all chatted. I've muted the microphones for the moment because then it's easier to not get feedback. But if you want to speak, you can just let us know in the chat box and we will unmute you and you'll be able to speak. In order to speak, your microphone needs to be on, but we've already tested that and that's all working really well. We do ask that you don't put the camera on because that takes up too much bandwidth. So this is the bit that is useful if you can write down, because what we have noticed, or what has happened in the past, is sometimes people's individual internet connections can make them drop off the call, and you can still phone in and access the webinar as it's going on by phone. So if that happens, you may still phone that number, and then there's a code that you need to enter, which is 6373694#, and then you'll get the sound. So you'll either get the sound, or sometimes people are able to watch the video on the webinar on their screen, but get the audio through the phones. I'm hoping that's not going to be necessary, but it's just useful for you to know. If all else fails, there is Alison's phone number down there. That's probably the most important thing for you to write down, because she will be able to help you if you have not got this number written down or something. So Alison's number is 0400 732 270. So that's the techie side of things over. So you can take notes if you would like to, but you will be getting these slides emailed to you after the webinar from Eastside BEC. So who am I? My name is Ursula Richards. I run a web development and marketing company called Online IQ. And Alison and I have been creating a whole series of different workshops and webinars for people who are in business and who want to get or know they need to get more information about how to succeed online. And we have done a whole range of different topics, from doing websites to social media to marketing. This particular webinar has come about because one of the first things after I launch a website in my business, one of the first things people say to me is, why am I not on the top of Google? I've got a website now, so I should be, showing up in Google. And so that it was kind of inspired by that, because there's some very basic things that you can do that will help Google find you. But before I launch into that a little bit, I'd like to hear a little bit about your respective businesses, whether you've got a website or not, and what's prompted interest in this particular webinar. I know that's 3 questions, but Belinda, maybe if you could go first, and then I'll get Dorothy to type in hers or speak. Okay, so you have work-life junction.
Sorry?
Can you tell us a little bit about work-life junction?
No, that's not me.
Oh, sorry, Dorothy. Sorry, I got confused because I saw that link pop up and another voice. Sorry. So you start, Belinda.
Yeah, my company is called Jialuo Zhongwen, and we have two things. I'm the distributor for Better Chinese, who sell Chinese teaching resources published in the US. And I also run Chinese classes in Adelaide for children. So I was a bit slow to get into e-commerce, partly because the school industry is less direct sales oriented, but I have gone that way.
Yep.
Now, and so I have a site, e-commerce site, and I'm also starting Facebook pages and YouTube videos, just looking at teaching methodology. But it's not very it's sort of just evolving in a fairly ad hoc way, and it's probably not very coherent. Well, it probably could be improved from a marketing point of view. I'm sure there's many areas for improvement. So I thought it looked like something I could benefit me to think about.
Different areas. Okay, but what it sounds like from what you're saying is that you're even though you're feeling it's maybe not so cohesive, you are a leader in that particular area, because you're saying that in your industry people aren't really doing or understanding the whole direct sales thing. And I think good business comes down to good sales, or I should say successful business, making money out of it. So I think you're going about it the right way, in the sense that you're exploring a whole lot of different things. And I think the cohesion will come once you understand how all the bits and pieces fit in together. Is there anything in particular that you're hoping to get out of this session?
No, not really. Just just general things, because I haven't really planned marketing or the whole online strategy cohesively. So I'm sure I can get some good ideas.
Great. Okay. I think it will give you an overview of the different angles from which to approach things, and that's what I've aimed for with this. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Dorothy, can you tell us a little bit about your business, Work-Life Junction, and what you're hoping to get out of the session? Are you able to unmute? I'll unmute you. That might be a bit easier.
Right, that helps. I was chatting to myself, I think. Yes, it's a coaching business. Coaching, delivering online courses and material. I've been in business for a year. I've got the website. I have regular blogs. I have regular newsletters. I have a Facebook page, all of which is kind of fairly active, but I'm not getting, and I pay a lot of attention to SEO and make sure every page is, that I've done the SEO work on it, but I'm really not getting any traffic directed from my blog or from Facebook over to the website.
So are you saying that your blog is separate to your website?
It's on the website, but I did a survey recently and sort of asked people how much do they just read what I've got in the newsletter, and do they then click on the links and go through and read the full article on the blog? Like I have a part article in the newsletter, and very few people actually click through and read the full blog, and when they do, they don't explore any other pages. They just read the blog and then they go away again.
Okay. All right.
So that's been very frustrating.
Yes, and so it sounds like the process of what you're doing is correct, and it sounds like probably what you'll need to be doing is a bit more tweaking about the content and the conversion aspect of it. And that's actually the point that I'm starting with. So that leads me in very nicely into where I'm starting. So thank you for that, Dorothy. I bet you didn't realise you were going to do that.
Right.
Okay, so because traffic is about not just getting traffic, but it's about website visitors doing what you want them to do once they get to your website. So I'm just going to mute you now. If I don't answer something by the end, I'll unmute you both, or you can type in questions as we go along into chat anyway. Is that okay?
Yep, cool.
So yes, that was a very good segue into what I wanted to, or how I wanted to start talking about this, because a lot of people focus when they, they launch a website and they say nothing's happening on my website. I'm not getting any, sales, or, people aren't doing what I want them to do. And so let's throw some money at it. Not that a lot of business startups have got a lot of money, which is where the tragedy comes in. They might start throwing the rest of the money that they have at it, and still there is no result. They might get more traffic, but they're not getting any better results. So what is more important than having lots of traffic? So here's some things to think about. Most people take 2 to 3 seconds to get an impression of your business. A 2006 study found that it only takes 50 milliseconds for a customer to form an opinion about your website. For contrast, a human eye blink takes between 100 and 400 milliseconds, more than twice as long. So you've literally got 0.5 seconds to convince a visitor that you are worth their time. But many business owners drop the ball and miss this window entirely. In fact, a lot of website traffic issues can be tracked back to that crucial first impression. So a lot of people have beautiful looking websites, but they may not have them set up in a way that's designed from the ground up to convert visitors, from visitors into customers. 55% of people leave a website after 15 seconds. That is a huge statistic. So what you actually need before you start driving traffic to your website is to optimize for conversion. What that means, that might sound like a bit of a jargony term, but what it means is that you have a plan about how you're going to convert a website visitor from a prospect to a prospect, and then converting a prospect to a customer. And I think, Dorothy, that's what you were referring to. You're actually driving people to your website, but the question is, why aren't they converting or engaging with you at some level? Just so you can see there on this particular slide at the bottom, there's a link that when you get this, you'll be able to click on it because it's a really good article. But it talks about processes and plans to convert your visitors into customers. And it's a whole mix of advertising, search engine optimization, social media, having a blog, and having great content, all which go into your website. So what is it that you actually need to do? What you need to do is capture the attention of the people that you are talking to. So you need to be clear about who you're talking to, and you need to create the right message for those people. So the thing that I'm interested that I'll point out here, and Belinda comes to mind, because she has two different target markets. One is, doing the resources, and the other is teaching children Chinese. So I don't know whether you've got two separate websites for that or two sections of the same website, but when you're talking about the different, what you're selling or how you're marketing, it has to talk very differently to those two different segments. For Dorothy, I would say what you would need to do is have a real think about understanding who the person is that you're talking to and that you're engaging with. So it's to do with being really clear about that. The other thing that is important is to have really clear and obvious calls to action. What a call to action is something that's very specific to a particular page and that you are asking them to do. So it doesn't normally just say click here. It normally says request a quote, or ask for a download, or, you know, specific words that are going to tell someone what to do, but also what they're going to get when they press that button. So when someone presses request a quote, they know that they're going to get a quote. So it's to do with being very specific with your language. So a note you might want to make to yourself is to look over the pages that you've got on your existing website and see how clear those calls to action are, and whether they actually tell people what they're going to do, or what they're going to get when they click on that button. Obviously, one of the most obvious, I'll start again. One of the main things that you need to try to do, if at all possible, is to capture your prospect details. So getting someone's email address is really gold. And you can do that through contact forms, quote forms, inquiry forms, or you can get them to subscribe to an email newsletter. Now that can sound quite basic, and people are getting a little bit fatigued with leaving their email addresses, which again is why it's important that when you're asking someone to do something like click something or leave an email address, you tell them exactly what they're going to get in exchange for that and why it will benefit them. So in terms of optimizing conversion, there's two measurement tools that you should have set up. One is analytics. My sound is dropping out. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Cool. I will. Yep. Let me know if that happens again. So, in order to optimize conversion, part of that is measuring what's happening on your website as well. So, Belinda and Dorothy, do either of you have Google Analytics installed on your sites so that you can see what's going on? Yep, Dorothy has. And Belinda has, yes. And is that something that you review regularly? What kind of information do you get from that Google Analytics? By the sounds of it, Dorothy's saying that people are just clicking on one thing and then clicking off. Is that right in your case? Okay, that's great. So Belinda, yes, that's a really good thing that analytics will show you, which is what the search terms were and how they got to your site. So that's valuable information. And Dorothy's saying mostly confused information, but it does indicate that people are not exploring other pages. Okay, yeah. So I think that's called a bounce rate as well. So people that come and that they leave quite quickly. So Belinda, in your case, you're finding out what they searched for, but it's also really good to look at what pages people, how long they spend on different pages and what their entry pages are and what their exit pages are as well. So if there's a high bounce rate, that's a real that's a conversion indicator. And one of the things to look for there is is there a discrepancy in the message between what you're asking them to do and what's actually there when they arrive? So by that I mean, if if you're sending them an email with a blog post on a particular topic, then they click further, they get onto the blog on that particular topic. Are they getting more of what they expected to find there, or is there something else there that's maybe incongruent? Now, I can't answer that question, and that there may be another issue, of course, but that would be one of the first things to look at is, how related is the link that they're clicking on to where they actually arrive when they get there. So, the other thing is goals that are important. So working out what it is that you actually want to happen when people get there. Because sometimes people don't actually have a plan. So they might say, okay, I want you to go to my blog. But then, is there any call to action on the blog? Is there a reason for them to subscribe to something? Is there a special offer? Is there a download, for example, that is related to what they actually clicked on that was interesting to them in the first place? Because if someone clicks on something to go somewhere, that kind of indicates that they had a level of interest to go there in the first place. So what is it that's not meeting what they thought they were going to get? That's the kind of questions you'd be asking yourself. So that's the optimization side of things. Now, that is a huge topic, but I don't go into that a lot here because obviously it's a webinar on traffic, not on site optimization. But I think it's really important to point out because there's no point getting a lot of traffic if it's not converting in the first place. So get your conversion right first, get conversion numbers that you're happy with, then invest in getting more traffic because it's going to give you much more return on investment. Does that make sense? Just checking if everyone's with me. Yep. Okay, cool. So Google My Business. Who's heard of Google My Business? You may know it as Google Places for Business or Google Local or Google Maps, and is often confused with Google Plus. And I say that Google My Business has had as much of an identity crisis as the artist formerly known as Prince. And obviously when I created this, Prince was still alive. So how quickly things change. Okay, so Belinda, you've heard of it, but you haven't used it. I think it would be probably quite useful for your teaching children Chinese program. So let's push on. So what is Google My Business? Google My Business gets your business onto Google for free. The way to get there, that will show you in the next slide. But it's almost, the easiest way of describing it is that it puts your business into Google's free business directory. And it does even help to a small degree with your website rankings because the process of verifying that you exist to Google kind of proves you've got a little bit of authority in that space. So this is the web address, google.com.au/business. So hints for Google My Business. It's important to claim your listing. And by claiming your listing, what I mean is that you need to go into Google, log in, even if your business is showing up in Google My Business, which it most probably is if it's been around for a while. The verification process means that you are kind of claiming it and you're going, yes, that's me, and yes, I will be able to go and update my details if I need to, changed phone numbers, changed address, additional services, whatever. You can really give a lot more information than what is there by default from Google. Now, there's a process of verifying your identity, and this process is really important as far as Google is concerned, because as you know, there's a lot of scamming activity online, and people will pretend that they are all sorts of things that they're not. And so Google doesn't want you to be pretending you've got 50 businesses when you haven't, or worse. So they go through a fairly rigorous process of verifying your identity, which involves them sending you a postcard and sometimes a phone call and all sorts of things. So it's important in that listing that you have the correct link to your website, and that it's exactly the same, that you use the same link throughout every single directory that you put online. What I mean by that is when you have a domain, sometimes if you have www. your domain name, you'll get to your site. And also if you do the domain name without the www, you'll also get to your site. But it's actually really important from Google's point of view that you only use one of those consistently. So make sure you do that when you're submitting and verifying your Google listing, that you pick one of those and you stick to it religiously. There is a screenshot there. You can see verified dogs and cats. That's the kind of thing you get. Quite often, this is Google's asking you whether do you want to verify this by telephone or do you want to verify this by postcard. Quite often you won't even get a choice and they will want to verify it by postcard. So just go with what they offer you. And if you do get a postcard, this is pretty much what it looks like. And it makes you feel really important getting a postcard from Google with some numbers in it. Then, well, it did for me anyway. And then you just go in and you put in those numbers into, you log in, and then Google knows, okay, yes, there really is a real live you and a real live business operating from that place. And you can only get one postcard or, one verification per address. So they do keep it pretty tight. So what you do is you go into Google, type in your business name there and see what happens. That's how you'll know whether you're already in Google's directory or not. Now, the reason it's really important to be careful about how you do your listing is I've got a bit of a case study here for you. I had a client, Constant Craving Chocolates, and if you have a look there, the Google listing on the right-hand side shows that it shows a physical address and it shows a phone number. The only problem with this listing is that they are not in Sydney in Glebe Point Road at all. They are in Tasmania. And this is the point that I'm getting to. Google makes a best guess based on what's on your website, as to what you're doing and where you are and what services you're offering. Now, the reason this happened for this particular client was that on their website, if you look here, Constant Craving Chocolates, they had that address. Let's have a look. Where is it? Under stockists. I can't see it there. I must be on the next page. No, I'm not quite sure what's happened to that. Anyway, this page had the Glebe. Oh yeah, you can see it there under stockists online, the cruelty-free shop. That's where the Glebe address is. Sorry, that print is so small on my screen that I couldn't see it there. So that's what Google has pulled up, and then it's, put a completely different listing for this business. So it actually took quite a bit of work to undo that with a Google expert and to resubmit things and to get it all fixed up. So it's much easier to get it right the first time round than to try and undo it. So that's Google My Business, and I'll just, you've written down that URL to check how you appear and what you need to do next. So the next thing that we need to talk about is search engine optimization and what that actually means. So search engine optimization, it really is all about the Google search. And I say Google, but it's any search engine. It can be Bing. Well, that's really the two main ones, Google and Bing. So people will type in things to find you. And Google aims to provide the most meaningful results when you are looking for something. So people tend to think that search engine optimization is some very mysterious and difficult thing, and that Google's the bad guy because they keep changing the rules. And in a way, it's true that they do keep changing the rules, but the reason they keep changing the rules is because they're wanting to give people who are searching for something the exact answer that they're looking for. And that's really not an easy task. So to do a good job of this, they create what's called an algorithm or a formula. And the purpose of that algorithm is to make a best guess as to what you're looking for and to provide you with those results. So what Google really want is for people to find exactly what they're looking for. So that's the only reason why they change their formula, because they are they are constantly refining this process for your benefit. For example, like even bizarre things, if you just type into, the other day when was this? You can see exactly when it was, 18th of November. I was trying to find out when a plane was going to arrive. And, in the olden days, well, not in the olden days, but maybe 5 years ago, you'd go on to, say, the Qantas website and check when the arrivals were coming in. Now I can just type that into Google and say, when are the next 3 planes coming from Sydney to Adelaide? And it gives me this kind of detailed information, and it tells me whether it's due on time, which terminal, which gate. Quite extraordinary. I might want to know what the time in Singapore is right now. I type that in and it will tell me. So Google really has done a very good job in many, many ways of telling us what it is that we're actually looking for, giving us the answers. So that really is what it's all about. And it goes right down to not just the words that you use, although they are key, but the order of the words that you use. So, for example, I live in Semaphore, and if I type in semaphore vet, I get, at the very top, I get a website that is semaphorevet.com.au. Now, if I do it the other way around, which is vet semaphore, what you can see is I get a listing, and these are actually Google listings, Google My Business listings, as you can see, that it tells me where the vets are in Semaphore. So I'll just go back to point that, and you can see the first, second, and third and fourth listings there are all Semaphore vet, but before that, I get all the vets in Semaphore, because Google has guessed that if I'm doing vet Semaphore, I'm looking for a vet somewhere in Semaphore, whereas they've guessed that if I put Semaphore vet, that I know that the clinic I'm going to is called the Semaphore Vets, if that makes sense. So that's just 2 words the other way around. So you can imagine when people type in long questions into Google, how many different ways they can be asking those questions and what variation and order of words they might be using to type those questions in. And based on that, you'll get completely different results sometimes, or always, actually. So there's lots of factors that affect search engine results, including the exact words that you have typed in, and that's called keywords or keyword phrases. I believe a much better way of describing keywords is almost questions, because pretty much everything someone types into Google is a question. And there's a term called long tail keywords, which basically means a very long question. So keyword phrases might be like semaphore vet, a long tail keyword might be, what is the best vet in semaphore for joint problems, for example. And people do type in those really long questions, so that's interesting. Location, which is from, if I'm typing in plumber, then Google will guess that I'm actually doing a local search, and that's when it's when you offer local services, that's when it's particularly important that you've got a Google My Business listing as well. And it makes sense that Google would assume that if I'm typing in plumber, I'm not looking for a plumber in Sydney or in New York, but that I'm looking for one that's close to my location. Same with food places. Then there's also what is called the site quality and speed factors. So Google makes a judgment call based on how well your website is designed from a range of factors, which I'll go into in a minute, and how fast it loads, because it figures, well, if you are a real and genuine business, you're going to do things properly. You're not just going to slap something up together, and there's a whole lot of things you can see on a website page and then behind the scenes in the code, which will help Google ascertain whether you're a genuinely good business or whether you've just thrown something up in 5 minutes. So understanding search results is important when you're doing a search on Google. And here's an example of Bendigo accommodation, because while it might look like all the same results, it actually isn't. So in this example, we have at the top, and this has changed slightly since this screenshot, because it used to just have this sort of shaded area at the top, and they are actually paid ads, pay per click Google AdWords. Right now, when you do this, when you do a search and it's a paid ad, the top 3 generally will have a little yellow ads button next to them. And similarly, on the right-hand side, that you will have Google AdWords showing up as well, and they'll have little ad signs. And that's just to tell the site visitor that someone is actually paying for that ad to display where it is. On the right-hand side, you have Google Places, or I should say Google My Business. And on the left-hand side, you have Google. It just displays kind of randomly sometimes where those location search results show up. There's kind of no rhyme or reason, or there probably is a rhyme and reason, but it's not really predictable where that's going to show up. But the way that you know that it's a Google My Business listing is that it's very location-centric. And then there's what's called the natural organic listings. And this is the true organic, what you'd call organic search engine optimization. So it's literally someone types in a search and you've got a website that's got exactly those words, and they come to a link on your page and they find you that way. So search engine optimization involves some common best practices when your website is being created, and this is both from a technical point of view and from a content point of view. So these best practices give your website the very best chance of being found by Google. Those practices are called on-page SEO, which means it actually happens on your website and on your page. So you have control over it, or you and your developer have control over it. Off-page search engine optimization, on the other hand, it tells Google what other people think about your site. So while on page you have complete control over, or you should have, off page is more like, well, are other people linking to you? Do they think you're pretty good? But all in all search engine optimization is best online practice, which will eventually create a good reputation and authority over time. And the thing to understand about search engine optimization is that it's not an instant fix. It's kind of like the tortoise and the hare. It's a very solid strategy, but it takes time. So it's kind of the tortoise part of getting traffic. Now, again, I have a slight problem here with the size of these images, but I couldn't get them any bigger. You will see them in your in this presentation when you get a copy to it. But it talks about all the specific on-page elements. So for content, there's the quality of the content, the research, the words that you use, engagement. I can't read that last one there. HTML is the code structure. There's system elements, whether you've got the basic elements like robots, files, how long a page takes to load, and so on. And there, what you'll see also in the black elements are things that people do to try and rank well with search engines, but that these are things that are frowned upon by Google, and you will actually get penalized if you do them. Off-page elements are things like getting quality links, trust, authority, and history. So history is, if you've been around for a while, that actually over time you build more and more authority, so obviously, so long as you're doing the right things online. Then there's personal factors, so your country, locality, history, and social things. And social, so things like, are people sharing your pages? Are people linking to you? And what is your reputation like? So these are, again, telling you what other people think about you. So you have more control about the on-page elements, but if you engage in the best kind of practices, you will also influence the off-page elements as well. I can see at the bottom you can give an example of the things Google doesn't like. I can see it at the bottom. Okay. I'm not quite sure when Belinda wrote that. Oh, okay. Can you give an example of things that Google doesn't like? Yes, I can. So under Black Hat there, for example, people used to, this used to happen, and I'd be surprised if it still happens, but this thing called keyword stuffing. So say you provided, Chinese education, and you would create a whole paragraph of text that just said Chinese education, education Chinese, stuff that doesn't make sense to a normal human reading it, but just a yummy word. Sounds yummy. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I never thought of it like that, Alison. So, yeah, so people used to do that. And then what they would do is they'd realise that a normal human being coming to that page wouldn't appreciate that very much because it made no sense at all. So then what they would do is they would use those same words because they would think they were tricking Google, but make those words the same colour as the background. So basically for the human website visitor, it would be invisible, but for Google, they would, because the Google bots would pick up the words. Now, for a while that used to work, but then, as I said, this is when the algorithms changed and Google went, hang on a minute here, you're just trying to trick us. That's not what we want, And so they would either ignore it or give you a bad score for it because they said, we don't want you to trick me. We just want you to do the right thing. So just do that. So that's one example of things that Google doesn't like. Another very common thing, and this is actually very important, It's called duplicate content. And I don't think the right word is penalized, but Google, if people copy other people's content word for word, Google will decide, and it can decide incorrectly, who is the original or which one is the most authoritative author of that content. So by definition, if they decide that it's one person, all the other versions of that content get demoted, because it's like there can be only one authoritative source of that. So that's called duplicate content. And what happens sometimes is people inadvertently lose their website rankings through no fault of their own, but because other people have copied really good content of their website and put it on their own. And for some reason, Google, says, oh, I think you guys are the original owners of that content. So yeah, that's just a couple of examples. Does that make sense? You can read a lot more about that, but if you look up black hat techniques or what not to do on Google, it will, there'll be a whole lot of things not to do, which is just as important as what to do. Okay, so the other thing with keywords is this isn't a bad thing to do, but it's an ineffective thing to do is if you use the same keywords on every single page. Say you decide that your website should rank for Chinese education or Chinese educating children in Chinese, say. It does you no good to have that repeated on every single page on your website. What you need to do is make each page have a particular purpose and a set of keywords, and use those keywords on that page. So the keywords go, you can see in the heading, in the title of the page at the top there, in the heading of the page, in any images. It's good to name your images in words that relate to the keywords on that particular page, and in the body of the paragraph. Obviously in a natural way, not in a unnatural way that you wouldn't describe it to anyone else. So this is what's called the on-page optimization, and this is the things that people actually can see. There's also actually, I'll just go back. There's also code behind the scenes, which is called metadata. And if you use some plugins if you're using WordPress, you can use plugins to do that with if you're not a developer yourself. Or if you know a little bit of code, you can put metadata, again, which helps search engines with defining a little bit more precisely about what's on each page. So say you're doing Chinese education for children here, the metadata would be perhaps a small paragraph that would summarize what's on this page that doesn't show up to the website visitor per se. It's in the code. So that is the unpaid stuff. Well, by unpaid, I mean you're not paying for advertising. You may need to pay people to implement some of this stuff for you. And then there's paying for traffic. So when would you actually pay for traffic? And again, to reiterate, I would never pay for traffic until I had optimized the conversions on my site. So to make sure that that people that are coming there are actually doing what I need them to do. So when you pay for traffic is when you need a fast result. Quite often you need it when you're in a competitive industry, when you can see a clear return on investment, because in the end, if you're getting more than what you're paying, you're winning, even if that amount is a lot. And sometimes when your organic efforts are not working, you might see what you can do with paid for traffic, because that can be targeted in much more directly in a lot of ways. And as I said, SEO is the slow, low road, like the tall, and your position in paid listings can be bought if you have the budget. And that's what Google AdWords looks like. So to do that, you need to go to Google AdWords. I'll just see in the chat box to see if either of you have paid for any kind of advertising, whether it's Google or Facebook in the past. I can't see anything there. But yeah, Google, and yes, you've paid for Facebook advertising but weren't very happy. Yes. And Dorothy, I have a Facebook boost post running at the moment and that is getting good coverage. Okay. So both of these, both Google AdWords, paid for other Facebook with minerals. Okay. Both these methods, they're not kind of panaceas in the sense that, again, it takes a lot of trial and error to work out what the messaging is right and what the conversion is between the ad. And here I'm talking about conversion between someone seeing the ad and then clicking on the ad. Then the next bit of the conversion is what they actually do when they get to your website. Now, Belinda, Facebook paid likes were from inappropriate. Yes, I wouldn't advise paid likes. That is not, it's not a black hat strategy, but you're not getting genuine people, you're paying for them. And the best conversion is through real live people. And yeah, that would be my advice as far as that. So Facebook ads, obviously we all know what they look like because they show up in the stream as opposed to the news feed, although there's more things showing up in news feeds now. Both Google ads and Facebook ads, you know, these are entire industries of their own, and I understand you're getting frustrated with it just not working. And I would encourage you just to spend some time learning about how it works, learning how to target your audiences, learning how to get the right keywords, because there is really no quick fix in terms of getting it right other than getting out there and experimenting. Okay, so Dorothy said that she's tried Google AdWords for other businesses and marriage celebrant and it was expensive for minimal results. Yes, I would imagine, Dorothy, it could be a fairly competitive area as well. And yeah, with all advertising, there is a plus to online advertising, is that you can really track your results, which is not something you can often do with other types of advertising. So at least with this, you can tweak it and try and persevere and get it right and make different changes. Whereas, you know, if you put something in a magazine or in the messenger or whatever, it can be really difficult to know where you're getting your leads from and how effective they are. Okay, so whether you're paying for AdWords, Facebook advertising or something else, make sure, as I've said, your site has been optimized for conversions, and also consider setting up unique landing pages for opting in visitors from your AdWords campaign, I should have said, or your Facebook campaign there. The thing about landing pages is that they're kind of like this intermediary between what someone's clicked on and where they're going to. It kind of warms them up. And your website is your website, whereas a landing page, you can create a very personal message to someone that's just clicked on an ad, which can engage them a whole lot more than if you just send them to the home page of your website. And in fact, it's definitely not good practice to run an AdWords campaign or to do Facebook advertising and then just send them to the front of your website, because the front of your website is likely to have a whole range of different things on it. And if they've clicked on something very specific, what they need to come to is, again, something very specific. So even if you don't have a landing page per se, make sure that the page they are going to isn't the home page, but the page that specifically talks about what your ad was all about. Does that make sense? Can I just check if that's made sense to you? Yeah. Okay, so here, yeah, Dorothy, you're using landing pages. Excellent. Okay, so here I've typed in car loan, and again, you can see you've got the Google ads showing up, People's Choice. So that's a paid ad. And below that, 1, 2, 3, 4, is ratecity.com. That's the very first one that comes up. That's an unpaid ad that's rating really highly on their natural search engine rankings. So you can see the difference. This is a very highly competitive area. So those ones to show up at the top will be paying a lot of money to get there. But what I wanted to show you was that obviously People's Choice, which is the one I've underlined, that's a credit union. But that particular ad shows up when I type in car loan. So what you can see is that it's actually taking me to a very specific page in People's Choice, which is to do with car loans, not anything else to do with People's Choice. So that's how that landing page works, because it takes me to this page. Now, this page talks all about owning the car of your dreams. Can you see how engaging that language is and how completely relevant it is to this search that I've made? So in 2 clicks, I'm finding out that I can own the car of my dreams. How clever is that? So this is that kind of conversion from ad to landing page or whatever page you're telling them to go to your website that is just very targeted to what my search query was for. And in one hit, I have this lovely message. I can apply online or I can get more info, and I've got an interest rate there straight away. So that would be answering pretty much everything I would want to know when I've typed in that search phrase. So I'm just realizing we're running out of time, so I better zoom through the next bit very quickly. One of the questions is why am I not on the top of Google when my site goes live? So there are some very basic things that you need to do, and I think both of you would have already done this because this is a newbie kind of question, but you do need to submit your site to Google, and you have to understand that getting to the top of the natural unpaid results takes time, and depending on your competition, for example, if you were starting a car loan company, you may never get to page 1 ever unless you pay for it. Some other people say, wow, I've typed my name into Google and look, I'm on page 1. How good is that? So I've got a client called Blackjack Getaway. They offer accommodation in Orroroo. And if she typed that in, she'd think she was doing pretty well. And I'm not saying that she's not, but you have to know that if I'm typing in Blackjack Getaway, it means they already know about you. So it's good in the sense that if someone's looking for your website, they will find it. But if I'm looking for accommodation in Orroroo and I've never heard of Blackjack Getaway, that's not necessarily going to come up. Now, I'm assuming it actually will come up for this particular client because she's been around for a while and it's a fairly remote location. But the point I'm trying to make is make sure you don't just type your business name in there, and if it comes up, feel happy with yourself, because people may not know your business name. You need to target people that are looking for your type of service, not just for your business name. People often, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you'll be getting emails from people saying that they will guarantee to get you to number 1 in Google. The truth is that no one can guarantee that with organic listings. Those skilled professionals can have good success with that. And with paid ads, that could be possible if money is no object, but you'd need a skilled campaign to achieve that and a good budget if you are in a really competitive area. There's a whole lot of other ways to approach this if you don't have a big budget as well, but you may need a professional. Okay, so I'm sorry I rushed through that last bit, but I saw I was running out of time. Are there any questions about that I haven't yet covered or that you might have for me? Not right now? Okay. So the thing that that you get when you come to these webinars, as you know, is you get a free half-hour consultation. And I would be really happy to talk through this and look through the specific elements of your websites, particularly starting with conversion. Because I haven't seen either of your websites before, it's good for me to come through and have a look with fresh eyes and see where the initial conversion things might be happening, and then to discuss what specific traffic strategies might work best in your particular situation. So I'll be sending you an email with that offer, and I'd love to have a chat with you about that. Yeah, because I can only cover kind of general topics here, and it's good to look at specific things. We do have a few more other webinars coming up, and this is to do with traffic really, and getting people to come and visit you, and that's getting your customers' attention through social media. And Alison is running that workshop on the 4th of August at Payneham 1 till 4. Writing and scheduling your social media posts is another webinar. And another webinar is to do with maximizing your business's exposure through boosting social media posts. So using boosting. And Alison, I'm very sorry. I was sure I had the date in there. I'm just looking it up now, 16th of August. But we'll make sure that information is in the follow-up emails for you as well. Okay, that's the free consultation information. So on that note, I'll just see if we have any other questions. I would love to learn more about your businesses and answer any questions that you've got here before we leave. And if there aren't any, I hope you have a wonderful evening. You're very welcome, Belinda and Dorothy. I can stop the recording.